Hi all, I'm Jack from Quilting Dreams. Today we're going to do a tutorial on a stripy heart block. This is the block that we're going to create in today's tutorial. This block is actually going to go into a quilt along, and that layout will be available in next week's tutorial as we do block 2. What you'll need for today's block is you'll need a jelly roll. This is a jelly roll friendly quilt that we'll be doing. For this one I'm going to be using My Summer House by Bunny Hill Designs. I really do love the coloured fabric that's in this particular jelly roll, and I think it will look really lovely in the quilt along that we're doing. But you can use your scrap fabrics from other quilts, or you can use any other jelly roll you like. For this one I'm going to use a Moda Bella Solid. The solid is 9900170. I traditionally use white as my backgrounds, but for this particular quilt along I'm going to try something new, and we're going to use this Bella Solid. It's a slate grey type solid. You'll definitely need some rulers. These are the two that are my go-tos, 6.5 by 12, and I've got the 20, I think it's 24 by 6.5. So they're my two go-to rulers, but I do have a series of rulers behind me that I definitely use as we move along. You'll need a rotary cutter. I use this one. I love this rotary cutter. I like that it retracts back in and it keeps it nice and safe while I'm quilting during the day. You'll also need a friction pen. That's what we'll use to there we go. That's what we're going to use to do corners from edge to edge. And being that it's a friction pen, with the heat of the iron, it will erase the line. And being that we're using it and we're cutting off the excess, there will be no residual line that you'll need to worry about. So that's what you're going to need for today's tutorial. Please stick with me and let's create this stripy heart block together. Okay, firstly we're going to select 7 of the jelly rolls. So we can select any 7 that we like, but it'd probably be good to have a bit of a mix. So we'll just pop, got some reds there. We'll take those ones, they're a little bit lighter. We've got some whites in there, so sorry, probably more cream I would say. And got some lovely mint green there. And we've got a few browns and then some more pinky colours. We'll pop those ones over here. So we want to select a range of strips. So we'll need 7 in total. So let's have a look at what we'll put together. So I think we'll take that one. Let's have a look. I think we might take both of those too. 3, we'll take a darker one. Or let's go for 2 of the green ones here because they're quite nice. So now I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so for the last one, let's go something a little bit different, but they're all very similar in their themes. Let's just have a look through this one here as well. I think we can go this one here. Okay, so let's just bring them back into view. We'll just pop these ones aside for now. Okay, we'll just pop those aside. Okay, so I've been through the jelly roll and I've selected 7 strips of fabric here. So I'm going to have the green at the top and this lovely stripe at the bottom of the heart. So what we're going to do, and you can use any jelly roll you like, you can change these around any way you like, work with whatever works nicely for you. You could even use your scrap pieces at home, so you may have leftover jelly rolls or a combination of a couple of different jelly rolls. This quilt will lend to a scrappy quilt. It can be quite scrappy or it can be quite organised. So I'm going to use the Bunny Hill design for My Summer House for my quilt. But you can certainly use anything you like. So I'm going to start off with these. So the way that I will do my strip piecing, I'm going to have the stripe at the bottom. And I'm just going to pop each one on top. That way I know when I'm doing my strip piecing that this one is the top one and I should end up with this one at the bottom, the stripe at the bottom. So we're just going to pop that aside for now. Now what we want to do is cut the rest that we'll need for the heart. So for this one we will have the heart and then we're going to put a border around it so that we can just make so that it finishes off and we don't have those the strips of the fabric being the borders. So what we'll need first is we're going to cut a 7-inch strip. So being that my ruler is only 6.5 wide, I tend to line it up with one of the lines on the cutting board, and then I'll come in 1/2 inch because I know that my ruler is 6.5, and we'll cut that first strip there. Okay, so we'll just pop that aside for now. We'll also need to put a border around this block. So for that we'll need 2 strips of 2.5 inches wide. And so let's just go ahead and get those 2. So you could do this, you could use a white background, it can be a scrappy background. You can use even maybe a sea glass type background, something that's quite aquary, that would also look really nice. I'm going to do my first cut at 5 inches. And then I'm going to move the ruler across and I'll do the second one at that 2.5 inches. Okay, so they're going to form the border for us. And then we've got the other piece. So we're going to subcut that one down. We'll just pop that bolt out the way because we won't need that again. So let's firstly make our first cut. So we want to cut off that selvage. So we're going to line it up on the board here. And I'm just going to swap the ruler over. I tend to use that ruler for widths of fabrics and then go down to a smaller ruler when I'm doing that subcutting. It's a real personal preference and you might have another favourite ruler that you like to use. Firstly, we're going to cut off that selvage. And then our next cut is going to be at 7 inches wide. So again, we know the ruler is 6.5, so I'll match that up there to the 1/2. And we'll do that first cut. So we have 2 of those. Pop them aside. And then we're going to do a 3-inch cut. So what we need here is 4 at 3-inch by 3-inch. So we'll just pop that there. And we'll pop that spare fabric aside for now. We're just going to subcut this down again. Just make sure with the 6.5 inch rulers that you're getting it around the right way. Otherwise you'll end up with possibly a 3.5 inch. Which is exactly what I did on the other side there. So we'll just subcut that down. So if you have the ruler around the wrong way, you end up with a bigger piece than you really need. So we just want 3 by 3, and we'll just pop that one off and pop that one off. Okay, now we're right there. All right, so we're just going to pop those aside. I'm just going to leave this binding to the side, and we'll do that as the second part of this quilt block. So we'll just pop that away as well. So firstly, what we're going to do is head over to the sewing machine, and we're going to start strip piecing these together. And that way we can start to form that inside part of the heart shape. So let's head over to the sewing machine and we'll start popping this through. Okay, so we're over at the sewing machine. We're going to get our first 2 strips. So that's number 1 and that's number 2. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to make sure we put these right sides together. And we know that that aquary light green is the top piece. So we'll match up the selvages at the top. And we're going to run these through. I'm going to sew all of them together, and I'll come back to you. Okay, so that's all our strips sewn together, and that's what it looks like. So just a couple of things. I'm using the Juke TL2010Q. I have my stitch length at about 1.3 when I'm stitching. That gives me a nice tight stitch. I don't change my thread whether I'm using darks or lights. I tend to use the same thread all the time. This is a Ranson thread. It's a cotton thread that I use on here. It works quite well. It does leave a lot of lint, so I do have to clean out the bottom under here quite frequently because it does get quite a build up of lint. But I think that's no problems at all. I also use the 1/4 inch foot when I'm doing my sewing. When I am sewing my strips together, because we have let's say the peaks and the valleys, I'll make sure that I line the foot here up with the peaks and when I'm sewing, so that I have that guided nicely on the side of the foot here. But outside of that, it's just lovely straight stitch sewing. We're going to head over to the ironing board now, and we're going to iron these iron this down so it's nice and flat. So join me over at the ironing board. Okay, so over at the ironing board, the next thing we want to do is iron this nice and flat. So in order to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to set these seams first for each of the rows. So I'm just going to travel down each one and set the seam. With this particular block, you can iron open if you would like to. I'm going to iron to one side because there's not that many intersections, and when I'm doing this, it's not a problem. It's not too bulky. The thing that with the bulk that we want to be mindful of is if you're doing the long arm quilting at home, or you're using domestic machine, or you're sending it off to a long arm quilter, we want to make sure we avoid as much bulk as possible, because that way you're going to get the best result on that quilt when it's all quilted. So but for this particular quilt, we can certainly go with ironing to one side, so I'm going to do that. But if your preference is to iron open, you can certainly do that as well. If you iron open, there is a step that you will be able to miss when as we progress through, because I need to come back to the ironing board and iron some strips in the opposite direction. But we'll show you that shortly after we've subcut this one down. You can iron each. I'm just setting the seams for all of them, and then I will iron them all together. But you can just iron one strip at a time, There's a lot of different ways you can do this. It's really just, you know, what sort of space have you got and what's your preference in doing the ironing. I just like to make sure I do this step first, and then I'm just going to turn it over and just pop that like that, and we'll just get that iron across here, and we'll get all of it ironed straight up. You could just do one strip like this and go all the way down, that's not a problem, or you can iron over the whole section. I've got a reasonable sized ironing mat here, so I'm just going to iron over the whole section, and then I'll probably run over each line just individually to make sure that I've got a really nice press down here, but just getting that initial one across the line here. So I'm just going to go ahead and do this. There we are. Okay, so there's our strips all ironed in one direction. We're going to head over to the cutting table. We're going to subcut down 2 strips. We will be using the remainder of the fabric for other blocks, so let's make sure that we just pop that aside for a future tutorial, and we'll use up the rest of this fabric as well. So we're just going to head over now and let's get this subcut down. Okay, so as we mentioned, we're going to have the green at the top and the stripe at the bottom. It doesn't really matter at this point how we have that, but let's just flatten that out a bit. You do have to maneuver these a little bit when you've done this strip piecing, because sometimes they will just have a little bit of a mind of its own. So firstly, what we're going to do, we'll just pop that ruler over there. We're going to cut off this selvage part. You can see that whilst they lined up reasonably well, they don't line up perfectly, and we don't want the selvage anyway. So let's just pop that off now. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to subcut 2 7-inch strips. So we're going to go there. So remember, I've got a 6.5-inch ruler, so I want to leave 1/2 inch there. So we're going to do the first cut there, and then we will do the second one here. And the remainder of the fabric, we're just going to fold up and pop it to the side. That way we'll be able to use it in a future block that we're going to create for this particular quilt top. Now, if we were to keep this as they are, when we go to sew the heart together, we will have to connect in the seams. They'll both be going the same way, and if they're going the same way, that will cause a level of bulk. It's not excessive, but I would recommend that when you're putting these together, that we go head back over to the ironing board, and we're just going to iron one of them in the opposite direction. Okay, just make sure that iron's nice and warm. And so we've got the direction is going this way, so we want to change that direction and head it back the other way. That way, when we are piecing the block together, we'll be able to nest those seams and we'll get a much better outcome. Look, you can do it any way that's your preference. It's I find that when I nest those seams, I get a really nice outcome, and I have there's a lot less chance of me getting it misaligned. I'm definitely still not perfect at that, but I feel like this is the way that works best for me. So just like that, we just pop those going the other way, and it's a small step, and we're going to get quite a good outcome with that one. Okay, so what we're going to do first is we've got our four 3-inch squares here. We're going to actually draw a line from corner to corner. Now, some people are able to do this freehand on their sewing machine and have a really good eye. I don't think that I'm that good at it, and I don't necessarily get the result that I'm after. So I tend to do the mark when my, there we go. Perfect. And we're going to pop that on all four of these. Just pop those out the way a little bit. Excellent. And the last one here of the small ones, and then we're going to grab the larger ones. Okay, that's those four done. Now we're just going to grab these larger ones here. So what we want to do is we've got our two pieces here, and we want to create that heart shape. So we want to go from the middle to the outside. So we're going to create one on the diagonal. There, and we'll just grab the other one here. Okay. So we're just going to place these on, and then that gives us a guideline when we're about to sew them down. So we'll just pop that down there. Okay, so for the next step, what we're going to do is we're going to take the 3-inch squares and we're going to place them across the top, and they're going to form the top part of our heart. So we're just going to pop them in the corners. Just like that. Now, at this point, some people would be happy just to pop over to the sewing machine and freehand stitch those down, and that's super fine. But for today's tutorial, I'm just going to pop a pin in the top and a pin in that corner. And then that will hold it nice and stable while I'm stitching, so then I don't have to worry about movement, and I know that I'm going to get that nice right angle there in the top, and it's not going to move. So let's just pop the rest of these pins in. We're going to go ahead over to the sewing machine, and we're going to sew these down and see how we go. Okay, so firstly we will need to change the foot back to the open toe foot. So we'll just unscrew that one, take that off and pop the other one on. Perfect. Just pop that down. Sorry. And we've got the 1.3 stitch length, and we're just going to go across. So we'll just go across all three on each one. Okay, so that's both of our pieces stitched down. And we're going to head back and we're going to cut off the excess before we do the ironing. So let's head over to the cutting table so we can cut off that excess. Let's just remove these pins first. So I put my pins a fair way away from where I'm going to be stitching. That way I can leave them in and stitch through and just take them out after. Other people like to have them close to where their stitch line is, and that's okay too, and they'll take them out as they progress through. I think it just comes down to what your preference is. So when I'm taking off the excess, I always leave a 1/4 inch seam in there. So I'll line that up with the 1/4 inch mark on the ruler, and then I'll just take off that excess there. So we're going to repeat that on all of the sew lines. Just 2. And then we've got this one here. Number 1 complete. Now you will notice that we have excess here. We're going to use that. I'll be using that in another block. I plan to use all the pieces of the jelly roll. So where we've got excess, I'm going to plan to put them into a separate quilt block. And there's the last one. So those pieces there, we're going to set aside. I'm not going to pop them in my scraps because I'm going to use them. And what we should end up with is looking like that. So we're really starting to form that heart shape. So we're going to head across to the iron and we're going to iron these pieces out. So then they will look more like a block before we put the borders on. Okay, so like I've mentioned before, the first thing we're going to do is set the seams. Now we have cut on the bias, so we do want to minimize the amount of, I guess, ironing that we do. We don't want to be ironing like this. We want to basically just tap down and move along and make minimal long motions. So we just tap down, and then if it was a longer one, we'd move along. And the same with this one here. You can see we're not giving it a lot of, we're not rubbing it backwards and forwards. We're just opening it up and then popping it in. Now we've ironed the first one out, and that's the natural way that the block will want to run. With the second one, so that we're able to nest our seams, we're actually going to go against the grain. So we will set those seams just like that. But when we iron in, we're actually going to iron it in. It doesn't matter on the outside one so much because that one there is not actually going to be nested with anything. So we can just leave that one as we would. But on this one here, we want to make sure we're going in the opposite direction to what we did on the other side of the block. That way we can nest those seams. And this one here, we're going to go in the opposite direction as well. And get that nice and crisp. So we now have our 2 blocks ready to be joined together to form our heart block. So that's looking lovely. So our next step is that we want to join these blocks. So we're going to turn it right sides together, and we're going to take the time here so that it matches up nicely, nesting those seams, feeling that that is a nice connection, and then popping a pin into there. Now, as I mentioned, I put my pins further back. That allows me just to sew straight through. And we're going to repeat that for each of the sections. So you'll see here we've got the two fabrics where they join. We're going to pop that there. I feel it with my fingers that it's actually, that it's connected and that those seams are nested. And then we pop in the pin. And we'll just do that for the rest of them. So with that done, we're going to head back to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch this. All right, so for this we need to change that foot back over again. So I'll just quickly change that to the 1/4 inch foot. Zip that one out and zip the other one in. It's pretty quick and easy. I know some machines it's just a little latch. We do have to tighten the little screw up there for that one, but it is pretty quick and easy. So we're going to use that 1/4 inch foot as our guide, and we'll do that straight stitch all the way down. You can do a back stitch here. So what do we end up with? Here is the block without the border on it. So you can see here by nesting those seams we get really lovely accurate connections there. So we're going to we'll iron that open and let's just see how that looks once it's ironed open. Okay, so let's just set these seams. And when I iron open, I just do one side first. And I'll just turn it over and then open it up. Get a nice hot press on there. And this is what the inside of the block will turn out like. And now what we're going to do is add the border onto it, and then that will finish this block off. Okay, so now one of the things is we want this block on the inside to be 13.5 by 13.5. Now just remembering we use 7 strips of the jelly roll, so we are going to take off a portion at the top here, but we're not going to alter the bottom section. So we'll just trim this bottom section up and then measure up our 13.5. The sides should measure very close to 13.5. So let's go ahead and just square this block up. Okay, so what your block should, the inside should be 13.5 by 13.5. So what we're going to do now is add those borders. So the 2 side borders will be 13.5 each. So we're going to just pop the selvage off of this one. And then we're going to measure in 13.5 inches. So I'm just going to use the board to assist with that one. And we'll use the long ruler so that we can get our 13. Okay, so this is going to be our first stitch line. So if we pop that here, we're then going to pop one on this side, and and one on this side. So you can use the pins again if you would like to. So right sides together, although this is a plain coloured fabric, so it's not an issue. And just pop that one on. Now you can put as many or as few pins as you like in. And pop that one over. And we're going to repeat those same steps on this side. And the last one there. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to sew those two sides on before we put the top and bottom on. So that's what it should look like at this stage. Okay, so we have the two sides on and we're going to pop the top and bottom. So they measure, so what we should be looking at is 17 and a half, and we are pretty much on that 17 and a half there. So we're going to cut two strips at 17 and a half. You can certainly use what was left over in that first strip. So let's have a look at what we've got in that one. No, not quite long enough, so we'll pop that to the side and we'll be able to use that on another one. And then we have this one here. Okay, so let's just pop it around the right way. 17 and a half is there. Okay, pop that there. And we're going to pin this top and bottom. Back to the sewing machine. Nice press now that it's all finished, and there is a finished block. Thank you everyone for joining me in today's tutorial to create the stripy heart quilt block. This is the first block that we'll create in a series of blocks that will go into a quilt along. I will have the layout for that quilt along at next week's tutorial. We'll create block number 2 in this quilt along. This particular quilt along will use a jelly roll. We'll also need some background fabric, and if there's any other fabric that you'll need, I'll let you know in next week's tutorial. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, please select the like button. If you'd like to see more of these tutorials as we develop this quilt, then please subscribe so that you can be informed when my next tutorials come up. In the meantime, keep crafting, and thank you so much for watching.